Or what if a CEO's multi-million-dollar helicopter had a problem only a single dad's backyard invention could solve? You'd think a high-tech solution would come from a massive corporation, right? But prepare to be amazed by the unexpected genius that led to a groundbreaking upgrade, all thanks to a humble inventor. The rhythmic hum of the city below was drowned out by the deep, uneven roar of the helicopter's blades. Veronica Steele stood inside the massive glass hangar of Skyline Aerotech, her arms crossed tightly, eyes narrowed at the trembling machine before her. The helicopter, her company's pride and a multi-million-dollar engineering marvel, shook in the air like a restless animal. The engineers, watching from the control booth, whispered nervously as the readings spiked red across the screen. Rotor instability again. "Shut it down," Veronica commanded sharply. Her voice carried no hesitation, only controlled fury. The rotors slowed, their reflection rippling across the glossy hangar floor as silence filled the air, thick and uncomfortable. "That's the 5th test failure this quarter," said her chief engineer cautiously, removing his headset. "We've reworked the gyroscopic stabilizer, replaced the carbon blades, even adjusted the dampeners. Nothing fixes the vibration at high altitude." Veronica turned slowly, her heels echoing on the polished floor. "Then fix the people who can't fix it," she said icily. It wasn't arrogance. It was exhaustion disguised as authority. For months, her company had been fighting to perfect a new stability system for their luxury helicopter line. A system that would make air travel smoother, safer, and quieter than any other. Investors demanded progress. Clients wanted miracles. And she, the woman who had built the company from scratch, refused to deliver anything less than perfection. But lately, perfection had been slipping through her fingers like sand. She walked out of the hangar, her reflection trailing her across the long corridor of glass and steel. Her world was sleek, expensive, and controlled, exactly the opposite of the chaos she felt inside. In her office, high above the skyline, the world glowed gold through the window as the sun began to set. The city's endless hum was both soothing and mocking, a reminder that even at the top there were problems money couldn't solve. She poured herself a glass of water, resisting the urge for whiskey, and stared at the digital blueprint on her laptop. The stabilizer design spun slowly in 3D, mocking her with its simplicity. Millions of dollars in R&D, yet the damn thing couldn't keep the helicopter steady in crosswinds. "Unacceptable," she whispered, running a manicured finger across the screen. Her assistant, Daniel, entered quietly, holding a tablet. "Ma'am, you might want to see this." Veronica barely looked up. "If it's another board complaint, tell them they can put it in writing." "It's not that," Daniel said, almost smiling. "It's a video. Kind of random, actually." That caught her attention. "A video?" "Yeah," he said, swiping through. "Some guy from a small town uploaded this a few days ago. It's not viral or anything, like 200 views. But look," he tapped play. The screen showed a shaky backyard. A man in a worn plaid shirt stood beside what looked like a homemade drone, built from scraps, aluminum parts, wires, and duct tape. The man's young daughter was filming, her laughter light and innocent. "Ready, Lily?" he said. The drone lifted off the ground, spinning perfectly level, even as the wind picked up. Veronica leaned forward. The drone didn't wobble, didn't tilt. It hovered motionless, even as the trees behind it swayed wildly. The man adjusted something on a handheld controller, then let go completely. The drone stayed steady in midair, rock solid, as if glued to the wind itself. Her brows furrowed. "That's impossible," she whispered. Daniel nodded, impressed. "He built it himself, apparently. Works as a mechanic somewhere in Riverside County. Calls it a magnetic gyro stabilizer." Veronica replayed the video twice, each time noticing details: the simple setup, the absence of corporate resources, the raw ingenuity. "Send me his name," she said suddenly, "and get his contact info." Daniel hesitated. "You're serious?" "Do I look like I'm joking?" She replied without glancing up. When he left, she stood by the window, arms folded again, lost in thought. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her engineers had million-dollar degrees and labs full of equipment, and yet a backyard tinkerer with a homemade drone had achieved what they couldn't. She remembered her father, who used to repair tractors in their garage before he passed. He'd always told her, "Real innovation doesn't come from labs, Veronica. It comes from frustration and a box of spare parts." She had laughed back then. But now, as the city lights flickered on below, she found herself wondering if he'd been right. Meanwhile, miles away in a quiet neighborhood, Jack Turner was finishing dinner with his daughter Lily, the same man from the video, rugged, kind-eyed, his hands scarred from years of mechanical work. The house was modest but full of warmth. Lily was telling him about a school project involving airplanes, and Jack listened with the same focus he gave to engines. "Do you think your stabilizer could work on a real helicopter, Daddy?" she asked between bites. He laughed softly. "Maybe one day. Right now, it just keeps your drone from crashing into Mrs. Parker's fence." She giggled, swinging her legs under the table. When she went to bed, Jack stepped into his shed. His sanctuary. Shelves of old car parts lined the walls. Wires hung from hooks, and the faint smell of engine oil filled the air. On the workbench sat his creation, a crude but beautiful stabilizer system, glowing faintly under a single light bulb. He picked it up gently, turning it in his hands. It wasn't about fame or money. It was about curiosity, about proving that one person with enough heart and imagination could make something that worked better than what billion-dollar companies built. He didn't know that someone from one of those companies was watching him right now, back in her office. Veronica sent one last email before closing her laptop. Arrange a meeting with Jack Turner, in person, as soon as possible. She didn't tell her team, not yet. She wanted to see for herself whether this man was a lucky hobbyist or a hidden genius. As she turned off the lights, the faint hum of helicopters echoed in the distance, the sound of her empire trembling on the edge of breakthrough and failure. The reflection in the window showed her face, and beyond it, the glowing skyline of a world driven by innovation and pride. But somewhere deep inside her, for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. What if the solution she'd been searching for didn't come from her lab, but from a small-town mechanic's heart? What if the future of her company rested not in another board meeting, but in the hands of a single dad and his 8-year-old daughter? She smiled faintly, almost amused by the thought. "Let's see what you got, Mr. Turner," she whispered to the window as the night swallowed the city in silence. The morning sun spilled through the cracks of the worn blinds in Jack Turner's modest home, painting golden stripes across the wooden floor and over the cluttered workbench that had become the heart of his life. The smell of coffee mixed with the faint scent of motor oil, an aroma that oddly felt like home. Jack stood by the counter in his old plaid shirt, sipping from a chipped mug while flipping through the mail. Mostly bills, some flyers, and one thick envelope that looked like it didn't belong there. He glanced at it curiously. The letterhead read Skyline Aerotech. His brow furrowed. Must be a mistake, he thought, tossing it aside as Lily came bounding into the kitchen with her backpack half-zipped and hair in a messy ponytail. "Daddy, you promised you'd come to my school's science fair this time," she said, pouting in mock seriousness. Jack chuckled and crouched down to her level. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Peanut," he said, tapping her nose with a grease-stained finger. "Even if my invention decides to explode again," she giggled, grabbing her lunchbox before darting out the door. Watching her go, Jack felt that familiar mixture of love and guilt, love for the bright light she was in his life, and guilt for all the dreams he hadn't yet fulfilled for her. After she left, he finally tore open the Aerotech envelope. Inside was a formal letter printed on glossy paper. "Mr. Turner, we have recently observed your prototype and would like to discuss a potential collaboration regarding your stabilization design. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." Veronica Steele, CEO. His hands froze mid-air. The Veronica Steele? The billionaire engineer who ran one of the largest aerospace corporations in the country. Jack blinked twice, rereading the letter as if the words might disappear. For a moment he laughed under his breath. "This has to be a joke," he muttered. Still, curiosity tugged at him, so he set the paper down and walked into his shed, his small world of miracles and mistakes. The shed was more of a museum of persistence than an actual workshop. There were coffee cans filled with screws, blueprints scribbled on napkins, and metal scraps salvaged from the auto shop where he worked. In the center sat his greatest creation, the magnetic gyro stabilizer. It wasn't pretty. In fact, it looked like something that should have been thrown out years ago. Wires exposed, magnets taped in place, and a small circuit board blinking unevenly like a heartbeat. But what it did was extraordinary. When attached to his drone, it eliminated 98% of wobble and vibration, even in strong wind. He'd tested it dozens of times, each time refining the magnetic balance through trial and error. His daughter had filmed the last test for fun. "Maybe someone will like it online," she'd said innocently. He smiled at the memory. Little did she know, someone important had liked it, enough to send a personal invitation. Later that afternoon, while Jack was replacing a carburetor at the shop, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Its polished paint gleamed under the sun, out of place among the dented sedans and dusty pickup trucks. The shop went silent for a moment as the door opened, and out stepped a woman in a tailored black suit, heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She adjusted her sunglasses, scanning the area with an air of authority. "Excuse me," she said, her voice confident and crisp. "I'm looking for Jack Turner." Jack looked up from under the hood, his face streaked with oil, eyes squinting against the light. "That'd be me," he said slowly, unsure if he was being pranked. She removed her glasses, and recognition hit him instantly. "You're Veronica Steele, and you're harder to reach than some of my board members," she said with a faint smile. The other mechanics exchanged looks, murmuring among themselves. "I saw your stabilizer video," Veronica continued, "and I think you've created something that could solve a very expensive problem for us." Jack wiped his hands on a rag, still processing what was happening. "Ma'am, that thing's just a backyard project. It's not exactly NASA grade." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "Neither was the first airplane." She gestured toward his shed. "May I?" Jack hesitated. No one, not even his co-workers, had ever seen his workshop. "It's a mess," he warned. "I'm used to chaos," she replied coolly, following him as he led her through the yard. The shed door creaked open, revealing his chaotic world of tools, wires, and wonder. Sunlight filtered through the dusty window, illuminating the workbench where the stabilizer sat like a crown jewel amid junk. Veronica stepped closer, studying it carefully. "You built this yourself?" she asked. "Every bolt," Jack replied. "Mostly from scrap metal and spare alternator magnets." She crouched, peering at the device with genuine curiosity, her sharp corporate exterior softening for a moment. "Do you mind showing me how it works?" Jack grabbed his old drone, attached the stabilizer, and powered it on. The whir of the blades filled the shed as it lifted off the ground. Veronica folded her arms, skeptical, until the drone held perfectly still in the air, unmoving, even as a breeze drifted in through the open door. Her eyes widened slightly. "That shouldn't be possible," she murmured. "Oh, it's possible," Jack said proudly. "I just figured out a way to make the magnetic field counterbalance the drift before it happens." She turned to him, impressed. "You did that without a lab?" He shrugged. "Just me, a soldering iron, and a stubborn streak." For the first time in a long while, Veronica laughed softly, not out of amusement, but admiration. "You realize this could revolutionize flight stability," she said. "Our engineers have been trying to fix a similar problem for months." Jack scratched the back of his neck. "I wasn't trying to revolutionize anything. Just trying to keep my daughter's drone from crashing." Veronica smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's where the best ideas start." They stepped outside as Lily came running home from school, backpack bouncing. She stopped abruptly when she saw the unfamiliar car and the elegant woman standing beside her dad. "Hi, sweetheart," Jack said, smiling. "This is Miss Steele. She came to see the drone." Veronica knelt slightly, offering a kind smile. "You must be Lily. Your dad is very talented." Lily beamed with pride. "I know. He fixes everything." The warmth in her voice made Veronica's chest tighten for reasons she didn't fully understand. She saw in them something she hadn't felt in years: family, simplicity, purpose. As the sun began to dip low, painting the yard in orange hues, Veronica extended her hand. "Jack Turner, I want you to come to Skyline Aerotech tomorrow. I think your invention can change everything." Jack hesitated, the weight of disbelief heavy on his shoulders. "You're serious?" "Completely," she said. "Bring the stabilizer. I'll handle the rest." As her SUV drove off into the fading light, Jack stood in the driveway, holding Lily's hand and staring after it. His heart pounded, not from fear but from the dawning realization that his life was about to change. He looked down at his daughter, who grinned up at him. "Daddy," she whispered, "I think you're gonna be famous." He chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Let's hope I'm just useful first." That night, long after Lily fell asleep, Jack sat in his shed again, staring at his invention glowing under the soft bulb. He thought about what Veronica had said, that it could change everything. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe it. He didn't know what awaited him in the glass towers of Skyline Aerotech, but one thing was certain. His simple backyard idea had just opened the door to a world far beyond his imagination. And somewhere in a penthouse miles away, Veronica Steele stood by her window, looking out over the glittering skyline. She couldn't explain it, but she felt something different tonight, a flicker of faith. For once, the solution hadn't come from her wealth, her board, or her technology. It had come from a man with dirty hands and a pure heart, and she intended to see just how far that spark could fly. The morning air shimmered with a soft haze as Jack Turner's old pickup truck rumbled down the freeway toward the glass skyline of Skyline Aerotech. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, knuckles pale with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. On the passenger seat beside him sat a metal briefcase holding his invention, his life's work, clamped between foam and caution. He had spent the entire night polishing its edges, labeling wires, and convincing himself that this wasn't all a dream. Lily had drawn a tiny smiley face on the case before bed, saying, "For good luck, Daddy." That smiley face, drawn in bright yellow marker, now gave him more courage than all the confidence in the world. As the towering skyscraper came into view, glinting like a blade in the morning sun, Jack exhaled slowly. "Here goes nothing," he muttered. The security gate scanned his visitor pass as he pulled into the sprawling campus of Skyline Aerotech, a place that felt more like a futuristic city than an office. Glass walls shimmered, drones buzzed across open courtyards, and polished helipads gleamed in the distance. He parked awkwardly between two luxury cars and adjusted his collar, suddenly very aware of the oil stains on his sleeves. "You don't belong here," whispered the insecure voice in his head. But then he looked at that yellow, smiley face on the case and smiled back. Inside, everything looked sterile, efficient, and unnervingly perfect. White marble floors reflected the glow of holographic displays showing helicopters in flight, each surrounded by numbers, graphs, and specs he couldn't begin to decipher. A tall receptionist greeted him with professional warmth. "Good morning, Mr. Turner. Ms. Steele is expecting you." He nodded nervously, clutching the briefcase like a shield as she led him through a corridor that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. The air smelled faintly of ozone and new technology. He could hear faint mechanical hums behind the walls, the sound of machines thinking faster than humans. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, Veronica Steele was already waiting. She stood beside a panoramic window overlooking the city, her posture impeccable, her black suit sharp against the morning light. "Mr. Turner," she said, turning with a polite smile. "I'm glad you came." Jack managed to nod. "You don't exactly ignore an invitation like yours," he replied, his voice steady but uncertain. "Good," she said, extending a hand. "Follow me. Let's see what your little miracle can do." They walked through a glass bridge that connected the main building to the testing hangar. A massive cathedral of steel, filled with the faint echo of turbines and the distant click of engineers at work. As they entered, a dozen heads turned, some curious, others skeptical. Jack could feel the weight of their stares. Veronica led him straight to a workbench where several engineers were gathered around a dismantled rotor system. "Everyone," she announced, "this is Jack Turner, the man behind the stabilizer prototype I mentioned." Murmurs rippled through the group. One man, tall, suited with a badge reading Dr. Miles Grant, Chief Engineer, stepped forward with an eyebrow raised. "This is your guy? The one from the backyard video?" Veronica gave him a look that silenced any further sarcasm. Jack placed his case on the table and opened it carefully, revealing the stabilizer, polished now, wires neatly bundled, magnets gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Miles peered over his glasses.
"That's it?"
he said skeptically. "We've built stabilizers that look like spacecraft, and you bring us a lawnmower engine?" Jack smirked faintly. "It's not about how it looks. It's about what it does." The tension in the room thickened, but Veronica gestured for him to continue. "Show them." Jack walked over to the demonstration platform, a compact rig designed to simulate rotor motion. He attached his stabilizer to the mock rotor with careful precision. As he powered it up, a low hum filled the hangar. The rotor began spinning slowly at first, then faster. Jack adjusted a small dial, watching as the stabilizer engaged. The hum evened out. The rotor remained steady, perfectly steady. No vibration, no shake, no oscillation. Miles blinked. "That's not possible," he murmured, staring at the data feed. Veronica smiled, folding her arms. "It's not only possible, Dr. Grant, it's measurable." The data screen beside them displayed a perfect flat line. Zero instability. Engineers whispered among themselves, some moving closer, others checking instruments in disbelief. "What's the mechanism?" one asked. Jack scratched the back of his neck. "It's simple, really. The magnetic field inside reacts milliseconds faster than the mechanical rotor, anticipating the torque shift and compensating instantly. It doesn't fight the motion. It flows with it." Miles scoffed quietly. "You're telling me you built predictive magnetic stabilization in your backyard?" Jack shrugged. "Guess so." The younger engineers grinned at each other. Even they knew what that meant. This man had just outperformed years of corporate research with a home-built prototype. Veronica turned to Miles. "I think that qualifies as proof of concept, don't you?" He said nothing, just stared at the readings. She looked back at Jack. "Mr. Turner, how would you feel about testing this on an actual helicopter?" His heart nearly stopped. "And his actual one?" "Yes," she said. "We'll start small. A controlled hover test tomorrow morning." "You'll be there, of course." Jack hesitated, glancing at the rows of sophisticated equipment around him. "I'm not sure your people need me hovering around while they do their magic." Veronica's gaze softened, just slightly. "It's your design. No one understands it better than you." Later, as the engineers began running diagnostics on his stabilizer, Jack stepped aside, feeling like a ghost in a place that ran on a language he didn't speak. Veronica joined him, hands in her pockets. "You're quiet," she said. "Just taking it in," he replied. "You've built quite a world here." She studied him for a moment. "I built it to solve problems," she said. "But sometimes I forget where the real solutions come from," Jack chuckled. "Usually from a stubborn person with nothing to lose." "Then maybe that's exactly the kind of person we need," she said. As the day ended, Jack walked out of the hangar with a mix of pride and disbelief swirling inside him. The skyline glowed orange as the sun set, reflecting on the glass buildings like a city made of fire. Veronica's assistant handed him a visitor pass for the next day. "You're cleared for test flight observation at 8 a.m., he said. Jack nodded, pocketing it carefully. For a moment, he turned back toward the hangar, watching through the glass as the engineers studied his stabilizer under bright lights, their expressions half awe, half envy. On his drive home, the city lights faded into the quiet of open roads. He rolled down the window, letting the cool evening air wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt like the universe had opened a door just for him, a small crack of opportunity in an otherwise closed world. When he pulled into his driveway, Lily was waiting on the porch, swinging her legs and holding her tablet. "Did they like it, Daddy?" she asked eagerly. Jack crouched down, smiling. They didn't just like it, Peanut. They want to fly it, she gasped, clapping her hands. We're going to be famous. He laughed softly. Let's just get through tomorrow first. That night, as Lily slept, Jack stepped into his shed again, but this time it felt different. The same creaky walls, the same clutter, yet everything seemed touched by purpose. He looked at the empty spot on the bench where his stabilizer used to sit and whispered, "Let's hope you can handle the big leagues." Meanwhile, in her penthouse, Veronica stood at her window once again. The city spread out like circuitry beneath her. Her reflection merged with the skyline, half steel, half human. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to smile, a genuine, quiet smile. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we make history." Neither of them knew that the next day's test flight would not only change the future of aviation, it would also bind their lives in a way neither could have ever predicted. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that looked too calm to predict the storm brewing inside Skyline Aerotech's headquarters. Jack Turner arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in his cleanest jeans and a freshly ironed shirt that still smelled faintly of motor oil no matter how much he tried. He parked far from the luxury cars, clutching the small badge that marked him as a temporary technical consultant. It felt strange, almost surreal, walking through glass doors that reflected his weathered face alongside polished executives in tailored suits. The receptionist smiled professionally, but he could tell by her tone that she wasn't used to greeting men who looked like him. "Good morning, Mr. Turner. Ms. Steele and the engineering team are expecting you in Hangar 3. As he made his way down the long corridor, he could already sense the tension humming in the air like static before a storm. Inside the hangar, engineers in crisp lab coats surrounded the silver helicopter like surgeons around a patient. Miles Grant, the chief engineer, stood at the center, barking orders, his expression sharp and his tone colder than metal. Veronica Steele was nearby, arms crossed, watching everything with her usual calm precision. The moment she spotted Jack, her face softened slightly. "Mr. Turner," she greeted. "Welcome back. We're ready to integrate your stabilizer today." All heads turned toward him, some curious, some doubtful, and a few outright dismissive. Jack nodded politely, clutching the metal case that held his stabilizer like a shield. Miles approached with the faintest trace of a smirk. "Ah, the backyard genius himself," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You'll have to forgive us, Mr. Turner. Around here we usually use calibrated instruments, not recycled car parts." A few of the younger engineers chuckled quietly, but Veronica's sharp look silenced them immediately. "Dr. Grant," she said coolly, "you'll remember that his car parts outperformed your lab models by a wide margin." Miles adjusted his glasses, unfazed. "We'll see how it behaves under real conditions," he replied. Jack placed the stabilizer on the workstation, carefully removing its cover. He didn't bother responding to the insult. Years of working in greasy shops and dealing with impatient customers had taught him that sometimes silence carried more weight than words. As the team prepared to mount the device, Jack moved closer, his hands instinctively guiding them. "You'll want to angle it 3 degrees lower," he advised one engineer. The man hesitated, glancing at Miles for approval. Miles frowned. "We'll install it as per our procedure," he said curtly. "Your intuition may not align with aerospace protocol." Jack straightened, meeting his gaze evenly. "It's not intuition, it's calibration. If you fix it straight, you'll misalign the torque reaction when the blades engage." Miles rolled his eyes, but Veronica stepped in. "Let him do it his way." The hangar went silent except for the metallic clink of bolts and the soft hum of tools. Jack worked quickly, efficiently, hands steady and sure. Within minutes, the stabilizer was in place, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a strange fusion of backyard simplicity and high-tech engineering. When the time came to power it on, everyone stepped back. The helicopter's engines roared to life, echoing through the vast space. The rotors began to spin, slow at first, then faster, slicing the air with growing intensity. Jack's heart pounded as the machine lifted slightly off its landing pads, suspended on a cushion of air. Normally, this was the moment when vibrations began. the rattling that made every test feel like standing next to a caged beast. But not today. The helicopter hovered steady as a stone, its reflection unwavering on the polished floor. The monitors displayed perfect readings. No oscillation, no drift, no turbulence. Miles blinked at the data screen, his disbelief naked. "That's impossible," he muttered. Veronica's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "No, Doctor," she said softly. "It's innovation." The engineers broke into murmurs of astonishment, a few even applauding quietly. Jack exhaled deeply, feeling his body relax for the first time that day. Lily's smiley face on the corner of his briefcase flashed through his mind. "You did it, Peanut," he thought silently. But just as quickly as the celebration began, it shifted. Miles's expression hardened. "This doesn't prove long-term stability," he snapped, "or resistance under extreme conditions. For all we know, this thing could burn out at altitude. Then we'll test it at altitude," Veronica replied immediately. "If it passes, we move into prototype integration." Jack felt a jolt of excitement, but Miles wasn't done. "With all due respect, Ms. Steele," he said, voice tightening, "we can't base our billion-dollar production line on a gadget built in someone's shed. We have standards, certifications, and results," Veronica cut in sharply, "which he's delivered more effectively than your department in 6 months. The hangar went quiet again, all eyes on the two of them. For the first time, Jack saw something beyond professionalism in Veronica's expression, a spark of fire, the kind that came from years of defending her ideas in a world that never expected her to succeed. When the test was over, Miles stormed off, muttering something about luck and non-scalable anomalies. The others dispersed slowly, whispering. Veronica turned to Jack. "Don't mind him," she said. "He's brilliant, but he hates being outsmarted." Jack shrugged. "I've worked with worse." "Cars don't talk back, though." She laughed quietly, the tension breaking. "You handled yourself well in there," she said. "You didn't let them rattle you." Jack smiled faintly. "Spent 15 years dealing with customers yelling about their transmissions. Compared to that, this was a polite conversation." As they walked out of the hangar, Veronica's tone softened. "I meant what I said. This isn't luck, Jack. You've built something remarkable." He glanced at her, genuinely moved. "You really think this thing can make a difference?" "It already has," she replied. "Sometimes change starts in the smallest hands. You just gave us a reason to believe again." That evening, while the lab team ran diagnostics, Miles sat in his office, staring at the test results. His ego burned. He couldn't accept that a mechanic with no degree had outperformed his entire department. Pulling up the stabilizer's schematics on his monitor, he began typing rapidly, copying fragments of Jack's design into a hidden project folder labeled Alternative Gyro Studies. He muttered under his breath, "Let's see how far this backyard genius gets without my help." Meanwhile, in her top-floor office, Veronica stared out at the skyline, her reflection merging with the glittering glass towers. For the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten, pride that came not from success, but from witnessing pure, raw brilliance untainted by greed. Down in the garage, Jack loaded his empty case into the truck, glancing back at the hangar glowing softly in the distance. He didn't see the politics unfolding inside those glass walls or the jealousy festering behind polite smiles. All he saw was hope that his little invention could make life better for his daughter, maybe even for others. As he drove home under the deepening orange sky, he imagined the helicopter soaring steady and strong above the clouds, powered not just by magnets and metal, but by a single dad's dream built in a backyard. He didn't yet know that success would bring not only admiration, but enemies, people who'd do anything to claim his brilliance as their own. For now, though, he let himself feel the quiet joy of victory, unaware that the real turbulence was still to come. The dawn broke with a streak of crimson light that painted the sky above Skyline Aerotech's private airfield. The helicopter sat on the tarmac like a sleeping giant, sleek, silver and silent, its rotor blades glinting under the rising sun. The hum of generators and the chatter of engineers filled the air, a symphony of nerves and expectation. For the first time, Jack Turner wasn't watching from behind a workbench or through a monitor. He was standing right there on the runway, boots planted firmly on corporate ground, the inventor of the machine's heartbeat. He could feel the pulse of adrenaline rushing through him, mixing with the cool morning wind. To one side, Veronica Steele stood with her arms crossed, calm and composed as always, though her sharp eyes betrayed the same tension that gripped everyone else. To the other side, Dr. Miles Grant scrolled through his tablet, muttering to himself about test parameters and statistical reliability. The battle lines between instinct and intellect had never been clearer. Are we ready for takeoff? Veronica's voice cut through the air like a blade, steady, confident, in control. Miles hesitated before replying, "Systems are nominal. Stabilizer integrated and calibrated." He glanced at Jack with a hint of disdain. "Assuming our mechanic friend's magnet trick doesn't fry the power circuits." Jack didn't bite. He just smiled faintly, keeping his eyes on the machine. He knew what his invention could do. He had seen it survive windstorms in his backyard. But this was different. This was no backyard. This was millions of dollars in motion, corporate pride, and human ambition all balancing on his small, hand-built stabilizer. As the test pilot climbed aboard, Veronica motioned for Jack to join her on the observation deck, a glass-paneled structure overlooking the runway. From there, they could see everything. The engineers clustered around their stations, the helicopter gleaming against the golden horizon, and the nervous energy rippling through the air. "You nervous?" she asked quietly as they stepped inside. Jack chuckled dryly. "Only a little. I've never had a whole company's reputation riding on something I built in my shed." "You're handling it better than most would," she said, her voice softer now. "If this works, Jack, it won't just fix our problem. It'll rewrite everything we know about rotor stabilization." He looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "Then let's make sure it flies straight," he said. The pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. "Skyline Tower, this is Test Unit Alpha. Systems green, ready for lift." The hangar fell silent. Engineers froze at their monitors, data streams flickering across the screens. Veronica gave the nod. "Alpha, you are clear for takeoff." The rotors began to spin, slow at first, then faster, the sound building like thunder rolling over the field. Jack watched, his chest tightening. The helicopter lifted an inch off the ground, then a foot, then several feet, hovering perfectly still. The stabilizer engaged, and the vibrations that had plagued every previous flight test simply didn't appear. The readings on the monitors were flawless. Zero fluctuation, zero oscillation. The machine hovered with an elegance that seemed almost unnatural, its shadow sharp and steady on the tarmac below. A collective gasp rippled through the observation deck. Engineers stared at their screens, jaws slack. Miles blinked rapidly, tapping his tablet as if the data were lying. "Impossible," he whispered. "Absolutely impossible." Veronica smiled slowly, never taking her eyes off the aircraft. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Smoothest hover I've ever seen." Jack couldn't take his eyes off it. For a moment, the noise, the tension, the doubts, all of it disappeared. It was just him, the helicopter, and the quiet hum of something working exactly as it was meant to. He thought of Lily and how she'd squeal if she could see this. Then came the real test. Altitude. "Increase lift," Veronica instructed. The pilot confirmed and began to ascend. The helicopter climbed higher and higher, the stabilizer adapting in real time. Crosswinds picked up, fluttering flags along the runway, but the helicopter stayed true. No shake, no drift, no loss of control. On the screens, the vibration graph stayed flat as a calm sea. The crowd of engineers began to murmur excitedly. Even those who had doubted Jack now looked at him with a mix of awe and envy. "We're at 2,000 feet, the pilot reported. "Still stable. Feels like flying through glass." Jack exhaled, finally allowing himself a smile. Veronica turned to him, her eyes glowing with genuine admiration. "You did it," she said. "We did it," Jack corrected gently. Just then, a flicker appeared on one of the side monitors. A minor blip, a short surge of power. Miles noticed it first. "Hold on," he muttered, leaning closer. "There's a current spike in the secondary coil." Jack frowned. "That shouldn't happen." The pilot's voice crackled again. "Seeing a minor fluctuation on my end. Still stable, though." The data leveled out quickly, and the helicopter remained steady, but Jack's gut told him something was off. "It's the coil connector," he said quietly. "It's drawing too much load from the backup capacitor," Miles scoffed. "You're guessing." "I'm listening," Jack shot back. "Engines have a voice. You just have to know how to hear it." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "Can it hold?" Jack hesitated. "Yes, but not for long. The stabilizer's compensating faster than it should. If the pilot pushes too hard, it'll overheat." She immediately grabbed the radio. "Alpha, maintain current altitude. Do not stress the system further." The pilot complied, keeping the helicopter steady. A few tense minutes passed as the readings normalized. Finally, the stabilizer's temperature dropped and the warning disappeared. The relief that swept through the room was almost physical. Miles exhaled audibly, pretending he hadn't been worried. After another flawless hover cycle, Veronica gave the order to land. The helicopter descended smoothly, the rotors slowing until the machine rested gently back on the runway. The silence that followed was deafening, and then came the applause. Engineers, technicians, even the pilot himself stepped out, grinning. "Smoothest flight I've ever had," he said, pulling off his helmet. "It felt alive somehow." Veronica turned to Jack, smiling wide. "Jack Turner, I believe you just changed aviation." He laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess my little toy's all grown up." Miles clapped once, slowly, the sarcasm barely hidden. "Congratulations, Mr. Turner. You've built something impressive for a hobbyist." Jack ignored him, but Veronica's gaze turned cold. "A hobbyist just saved you 6 months of research," she said sharply. "Maybe try learning something from him." Miles turned away, muttering under his breath, but his eyes burned with resentment. As the crowd dispersed, Jack walked out onto the runway. He placed his hand gently against the helicopter's cool metal side, feeling the faint warmth of the stabilizer inside. Veronica joined him quietly. "How does it feel?" she asked. He looked up at the sky, the wind brushing his hair. "Like it finally worked," he said softly. "Like all those nights in the shed meant something." She nodded, her voice almost a whisper. "They did. More than you know." He smiled, turning toward her. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "we start the next phase. Production, patents, recognition." Her expression softened. "You're part of this now, Jack. Officially." He stared at her, stunned. I mean, she interrupted gently. "You're no longer just a mechanic from Riverside. You're Skyline Aerotech's newest innovator." For a moment, Jack couldn't speak. All he could think about was Lily and how proud she'd be. "She'll never believe this," he said, smiling. "Then bring her next time," Veronica replied warmly. As the sun set over the airfield, the helicopter gleamed like a promise kept. What had started as a backyard experiment had just rewritten the rules of flight. Jack Turner, the single dad who'd once built toys for his daughter, had unknowingly built a future. But as the last rays of sunlight faded, a shadow stirred behind the glass walls of the control tower. Dr. Miles Grant, staring down at the data feed with envy flickering in his eyes. He wasn't celebrating. He was planning. And the next chapter of Jack's journey would prove that success, no matter how pure, always comes with a price. The morning after the successful flight test felt unreal to Jack Turner. For the first time in years, he didn't wake to the clatter of tools or the rattle of an old air compressor. Instead, his phone buzzed endlessly with notifications, unread emails, press inquiries, and a dozen missed calls. He stared at the screen in disbelief. His name, was being mentioned in headlines alongside Skyline Aerotech, a company that until a week ago had been a distant fantasy. Mechanics' backyard invention revolutionizes aviation stability. Single dad builds what billion-dollar engineers couldn't. Jack scrolled through the articles, half expecting it all to vanish like a dream. But the pictures were real. The helicopter mid-flight, perfectly steady. The data charts flatlined in perfection. and a shot of him standing beside Veronica Steele, wind blowing through his hair, looking as stunned as he felt. At the breakfast table, Lily was munching cereal while watching the morning news, her little legs swinging off the chair. When his face appeared on TV, she gasped so loudly she nearly spilled her milk. "Daddy, you're on TV!" she shouted. Jack chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Guess I am, Peanut. Does that mean we're rich now?" she asked with innocent curiosity. Jack laughed again, shaking his head. "Not quite. It just means Daddy's invention actually worked. So Miss Steele will buy us a big house now," she said hopefully. Jack smiled, his heart tightening a little. "Maybe someday. For now, I just want to make something better for both of us." Lily nodded thoughtfully, then leaned in close, whispering, "You looked cool on TV." "Daddy." It was the highest praise he could imagine. By mid-morning, he was back at Skyline Aerotech. Only this time, he wasn't escorted in as an outsider. The receptionist greeted him with a wide grin. "Mr. Turner, welcome back," she said, handing him a visitor pass. The subtle shift in tone wasn't lost on him. Respect had replaced curiosity. As he rode the elevator up to Veronica's office, the same corridors that had once felt cold and alien now hummed with familiarity. When he entered her sleek glass office, Veronica was already waiting, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in hand. The city stretched out behind her, its towers catching the morning sun like shards of glass. She turned and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Jack Turner," she said, "our quiet mechanic turned hero." He grinned awkwardly. "I'm not sure about hero, but I'll take a quiet mechanic." She gestured toward the seat across from her desk. "Sit. We have a lot to talk about." He sat, still uneasy in a chair that probably cost more than his truck. Veronica set a thick folder in front of him, contracts, charts, patent forms, and projections. "Here's the situation," she began. "Your stabilizer, which, by the way, is already being called the Turner Gyro by our press team, has passed preliminary tests with results no one thought possible. We want to take it global," Jack blinked. "Global?" "Mass production," she explained. "Commercial and military aircraft, drones, medevac choppers. The potential is enormous. I want you to join Skyline officially as co-developer and head of mechanical innovation for this project." Jack stared at her, stunned into silence. "You're offering me a job?" She nodded. "A partnership, actually, with royalties, shares, and creative control. You deserve that much." Jack leaned back, the weight of her words pressing down on him like gravity. A man who once patched car engines for a living was now being offered a seat at the table of a global corporation. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. "I don't have a degree," he said quietly. "I don't belong in boardrooms." Veronica smiled. "Neither did I when I started. I built my first prototype in my father's barn. What matters isn't a degree, it's results. You've already proven yourself." She slid the papers closer. "Take your time, but if you're in, we can begin patent filing today." He picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly. He thought of Lily, her laughter, her dreams, her unshakable belief in him. For years, he told her that hard work would pay off one day. Maybe this was that day. "I'm in," he said finally. Veronica extended her hand, and he shook it firmly. "Welcome to Skyline, Mr. Turner," she said with a hint of pride. "Let's make history." Over the next few days, Jack's life transformed faster than he could comprehend. Reporters camped outside his small home, hoping for interviews. Neighbors dropped by with congratulations, and his boss at the auto shop jokingly said, "Guess I lost my best mechanic to the big leagues." He and Lily moved temporarily into a company-provided apartment near the city. Modern, clean, and miles away from their creaky old house. Lily loved it. "It looks like a hotel!" she exclaimed, running from room to room. Jack smiled, but couldn't shake the sense that he didn't quite belong there yet. At Skyline, he worked side by side with Veronica and the engineering team, refining his design for mass production. Though some of the older engineers still treated him with quiet skepticism, the results silenced most of them. His intuition, the same instinct honed by years of fixing engines, often caught flaws the computer simulations missed. Even Miles, though still distant, couldn't argue with the outcomes. But Jack could feel the tension whenever he walked into a room. Behind polite smiles lurked something else: envy. One evening, after a long day of testing, Veronica invited Jack to dinner at an upscale rooftop restaurant. The city lights shimmered below like a field of stars. "You've adapted well," she said, sipping her wine. "Most people in your position would have been overwhelmed." Jack shrugged. "Maybe I just don't know enough to be scared yet," she laughed. "You're modest, but that's part of why people trust you. You remind them of what innovation is supposed to be: simple, human, genuine." Her gaze softened. "You did something remarkable, Jack. You reminded me of why I started this company." He met her eyes, surprised by the sincerity there. "You know," he said, "you don't talk like a CEO." "That's because I'm tired of being one all the time," she admitted. "It's lonely at the top." The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the city below filling the space between them. When he returned home that night, Lily was waiting up, sketching airplanes at the kitchen table. "Did you and Miss Steele have fun?" she asked with a mischievous grin. Jack smiled, ruffling her hair. "It was just dinner, Peanut." "She likes you," Lily teased. "You think everyone likes me?" he said, laughing. "That's because they should," she replied with the confidence only a child could have. But even as laughter filled their apartment, shadows were gathering back at Skyline Aerotech. In the dim light of his office, Miles sat hunched over his computer, eyes gleaming with quiet malice. On his screen, the blueprints of Jack's stabilizer glowed faintly. He zoomed in, copying files onto a hidden drive. "You may have impressed her," he muttered to himself, "but this invention belongs in my department." As the progress bar filled, he smirked. "Let's see how long the golden boy lasts when someone else owns his miracle." Meanwhile, across the city, Jack lay awake staring at the ceiling, unaware that the world he'd built from dreams and grease-stained hands was already under threat. For now all he felt was gratitude for the chance, for the belief, for the second life his invention had given him. He turned his head toward Lily's room, hearing her soft, steady breathing, and whispered to the dark, "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Outside, the wind howled gently, as if warning him, every rise carries its storm. The days following the big partnership announcement were a blur of flashing cameras, congratulatory handshakes, and sleepless nights. Jack Turner had gone from a small-town mechanic to a face recognized in newspapers and tech journals. The company's press department painted him as a humble genius, the everyman inventor who had saved Skyline Aerotech. But with every smiling photo came a growing unease he couldn't quite shake. Veronica noticed it too. "You're still not used to this, are you?" she asked one morning as they walked through the busy design floor, engineers bustling around them. Jack shrugged, forcing a half-smile. "I used to fix carburetors in my shed. Now people want me to sign autographs on blueprints. That feels strange," she laughed lightly. "You'll adjust." Yet beneath her composed exterior, even she could sense something was shifting in the air, something cold and calculated. Just beyond the gleam of progress, 2 weeks later, the first sign of trouble appeared quietly, like a hairline crack in a mirror. During a project review, Veronica's assistant rushed into her office, pale and breathless. "Ma'am, you need to see this," he said, placing a tablet on her desk. The screen displayed an online tech journal announcing the debut of a new stabilization system from a rival company, Aeronova Dynamics, almost identical in design to Jack's invention. Same core technology, same blueprints, same specs, even the same magnetic counterbalance mechanism. The only difference was the name, Adaptive Aero Stabilizer Model X. Veronica's blood ran cold. "This is impossible," she said, her voice low and sharp. "We haven't even finished our prototype series yet." She scrolled furiously through the images. It was their design, Jack's design, stolen and repackaged. Her mind raced. Who had access to our files? By noon, the entire executive floor was in chaos. Lawyers flooded in, phones rang non-stop, and murmurs of sabotage spread through the corridors like wildfire. Jack was called into Veronica's office, confusion etched across his face. She turned the tablet toward him. "Jack, did you share your schematics with anyone outside Skyline?" He blinked, stunned. "What, no? Why would I?" "Because someone did," she said grimly. He stared at the design on the screen, his stomach twisting. "That's my stabilizer," he said quietly. "I recognize the coil configuration. I built that by hand." His voice cracked with disbelief. "They even copied the alignment ring. I made that from a transmission bearing in my garage." Veronica leaned back, rubbing her temples. "Then someone inside this company stole it. They convened an emergency meeting with the engineering heads." Miles Grant sat at the far end of the table, arms crossed, an unreadable smirk on his face. Veronica addressed the room. "Aeronova's new stabilizer matches our internal design, almost identically. The leak happened from within. I want to know who had access." The chief of IT began listing names: engineers, assistants, technicians. Jack sat silently, feeling every eye in the room shift toward him. One voice finally spoke up. "With all due respect," said Miles, feigning calm, "Mr. Turner's home system wasn't part of our secure network. It's possible the breach came from his personal devices." A murmur rippled through the room. Jack looked up sharply. "You think I sold my own design?" Miles shrugged. "I think we can't rule anything out. You said yourself you uploaded videos of your work before joining us. Maybe someone saw it, maybe you sent something." "Enough!" Veronica cut in sharply, her tone icy. "Jack isn't the source." Miles tilted his head, voice dripping with condescension. "How can you be sure?" She met his gaze coldly. "Because unlike some people in this room, he has nothing to gain by betrayal." The meeting ended in tense silence. Veronica ordered a full audit of system access logs and data transfers. That night, while others went home, she stayed late reviewing every record, her eyes burning from hours of staring at code. Around midnight she found it, an unauthorized transfer from her internal server, routed through an encrypted account belonging to none other than Dr. Miles Grant. The timestamp matched the night after the flight test. Her heart sank. It had been him all along. The next morning, Veronica confronted him privately in her office. "Why?" she demanded. Miles didn't deny it. He sat calmly, almost smugly. "Because it was mine before it was his," he said simply. "I've been working on stabilization algorithms for years. His little toy didn't belong in our system without my oversight." She slammed her hand on the desk. "You stole it, Miles. You betrayed this company." He leaned back lazily. "Please, I improved it. Aeronova offered me double my salary and full patent credit. Why should I waste genius under your pet project?" Veronica's eyes burned. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think Aeronova will protect you? You're just a disposable pawn," he smirked. "Maybe, but at least I'll be a rich one." Security escorted him out within the hour, but the damage was done. The story leaked to the press. Skyline engineer accused of espionage. The media twisted the narrative, suggesting Jack's invention wasn't entirely his. That internal disputes over ownership had fueled the scandal. Jack read the headlines in disbelief, his hands trembling. "They're saying I didn't build it alone," he muttered, pacing in frustration. Veronica stood beside him in her office, calm, but visibly exhausted. "Let them talk. The truth will surface." "It's not just talk," Jack said, his voice cracking. "People online think I'm a fraud, that I stole from him." His breath hitched as anger and heartbreak warred inside him. "Lily saw it on TV, Veronica. She asked if I lied." Veronica stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Jack, look at me." He did. "You didn't steal anything. You built that stabilizer with your own hands, long before you ever set foot in this building. And I'll make damn sure the world knows it." She picked up her phone. "I'm calling our legal team. We'll file for full patent ownership immediately, under your name." He blinked. "Under my name?" She nodded. "You deserve the credit. Not the company, not me. You." The legal battle that followed was grueling, but the evidence was undeniable. The original schematics, time-stamped videos of Jack's backyard prototypes, and Lily's recordings of his early tests all proved his authorship beyond question. Aeronova backed down under pressure, firing Miles within days. The press that had doubted Jack turned their narrative once more, mechanic vindicated in corporate theft scandal. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. The stress had taken its toll. Jack stopped sleeping properly, haunted by the realization that success could turn allies into enemies overnight. Veronica, too, carried the weight. She had built an empire on innovation and trust, only to see both nearly destroyed from within one evening. After the verdict was announced, she found Jack in the hangar, staring at the helicopter that had started it all. The setting sun cast long shadows across the floor, bathing the machine in amber light. "You were right," he said quietly without turning. "It wasn't the machine that needed stabilizing. It was the people around it." Veronica stood beside him, her expression softening. "Sometimes innovation shakes more than engines," she said. "It shakes egos, systems, everything built on pride." He nodded slowly. "Guess I wasn't ready for that." "No one ever is," she replied gently. They stood in silence, watching the light fade from the sky. For Jack, the betrayal had left scars, not on his invention, but on his trust. Yet somewhere deep down, beneath the exhaustion and bitterness, a quiet flame still burned. He had fought for his truth and won. And though he didn't yet know what the future held, one thing was certain: he would never again underestimate the cost of success, or the strength it took to hold on to what mattered most. The morning of the global press conference dawned clear and golden, as if the sky itself had decided to celebrate the day. The world's media had gathered outside Skyline Aerotech's headquarters, their cameras flashing like 1,000 tiny suns. A massive silver and black helicopter stood proudly on the platform at the center of the runway, its polished body reflecting the sunrise. Above its nose, freshly painted in bold white letters, was the name The Lily Gyro. When Jack Turner saw it for the first time, his breath caught in his chest. He stood beside Veronica Steele, the crowd's murmur fading into silence as the name sank in. "You named it after her?" he asked softly, emotion thick in his voice. Veronica smiled. "It's only right," she said. "Without Lily, you never would have built it. And without you, none of this would exist." Jack turned toward her, gratitude in his eyes. "She's going to lose her mind when she sees that," he said with a choked laugh. The past few months had been a whirlwind. Lawsuits, meetings and repairs of broken trust, but somehow, through persistence and loyalty, they had turned chaos into triumph. The truth about Miles Grant's theft had gone public, and the world had rallied behind Jack and his story, the single dad who built something revolutionary in his backyard. The news cycle had dubbed him the mechanic who changed the skies. Even now, as reporters and executives crowded the airfield, Jack couldn't quite believe this was real. He still felt like the same man who once fixed cars for a living, whose hands were more comfortable wrapped around a wrench than a pen. But now, those same hands had reshaped an entire industry. Veronica stepped forward as the cameras began to roll. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice strong and commanding, "today is not just about technology. It's about what happens when determination meets opportunity, when ingenuity is given a chance to rise." She turned slightly toward Jack. "A few months ago, I met a man who reminded me that brilliance doesn't only come from laboratories or boardrooms. It comes from garages, kitchens, and backyards, from people who refuse to stop trying." She gestured toward the helicopter behind her. "This aircraft is the first of its kind, stabilized by an innovation that will redefine modern aviation. And it exists because one father refused to give up." She paused, smiling at him. "Mr. Jack Turner." The applause that followed was thunderous. Cameras flashed as Jack stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. He wasn't used to speeches. He'd never written one. He just looked at the faces before him, the reporters, the engineers, and behind them Lily sitting in the front row, waving shyly at him, and spoke from the heart. "I don't really know what to say," he began, his voice humble but steady. "I never planned to invent anything. I was just trying to make something that worked for my daughter. Something simple, something good. And somehow, it turned into all of this." The crowd chuckled softly. He smiled, continuing. I guess that's the funny thing about life. Sometimes the smallest things you build in love become the biggest things you ever do. He glanced at Lily again. This invention isn't just mine. It's hers too. Because every night she'd sit with me in the shed, handing me tools, asking questions, reminding me why it's worth trying again, even when things break. So if this stabilizer has a name, it should be hers. Because she kept me steady. He paused, voice trembling slightly. She's my gyro. The audience erupted in applause once more, and Lily beamed, her small hands clapping wildly. Veronica placed a hand over her heart, visibly moved. After the ceremony, journalists surrounded them for interviews, but Jack barely heard the questions. His mind was elsewhere, in the echo of his shed, the smell of grease and dust, the laughter of his daughter when the drone finally worked. Everything that had once been ordinary now felt extraordinary. It wasn't fame that filled his heart, but fulfillment, the sense that he'd done something that mattered. Later that afternoon, Veronica invited Jack and Lily for a private flight, the first official demonstration of the Lily gyro. The three of them boarded the helicopter, escorted by a small team of pilots and engineers. As the rotors began to spin, Jack reached for Lily's hand, and she squeezed it tightly, her eyes wide with wonder. "You ready to fly, Peanut?" he asked. "Ready?" she said, grinning ear to ear. The helicopter lifted gently off the ground, smooth as silk, gliding upward through the golden light of the setting sun. The city spread beneath them, roads like veins, buildings like glimmering jewels, rivers of light stretching toward the horizon. From the cockpit, Veronica turned back with a smile. "Look at that," she said. "Perfectly balanced. Not a single vibration." Jack nodded, his throat tight. "She's steady," he murmured. "Just like she was meant to be." Lily pressed her face to the window, laughing in pure joy as clouds drifted past. "We're flying, Daddy." "We're really flying." He couldn't stop smiling. In that moment, the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the doubts and the losses all seemed to melt away. The world had taken everything from him once, but now it was giving something back. When they landed, a small crowd of onlookers clapped from the runway. Lily jumped into her father's arms, hugging him so tight he could barely breathe. "You're the best inventor ever," she said. He laughed, tears threatening to fall. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "We just made something good together." Veronica approached, her eyes glinting in the sunset. "You know, Jack," she said, "I've worked with hundreds of engineers, scientists, and designers, but none of them had what you have." He tilted his head. "What's that?" "Heart," she said simply. They stood there for a moment. Three silhouettes against the burning horizon, the visionary, the mechanic, and the little girl, whose name would soon be painted on every new helicopter Skyline produced. Jack watched the glowing sky and whispered, "You know, I think my dad would have liked to see this." Veronica smiled. "I think he just did." In the months that followed, the Lily gyro became a global success. Airlines, rescue teams, and even military fleets adopted it, praising its flawless balance and reliability. The world called it a revolution. But for Jack, the real victory wasn't the fame or the money. It was the quiet evenings when he could come home, cook dinner with Lily, and know he'd given her a life built not from luck, but from persistence and love. One evening, long after the world had moved on to the next big thing, Jack sat on his porch, watching the stars. The soft hum of a passing helicopter echoed in the distance, steady and true, his stabilizer working somewhere out there, keeping someone safe. He smiled, sipping his coffee. Lily came out in her pajamas, carrying a sketchbook. "Daddy, I drew something for you." She handed him the page, a crayon drawing of a helicopter with 3 stick figures inside. Daddy, me, and Miss Steele. Above it, in big letters, she had written, "The sky's the limit." Jack looked down at the drawing, his heart full. "You're right, Peanut," he said, pulling her close. "It really is." As the night wind rustled through the trees and the sound of another helicopter passed overhead, Jack realized that some inventions don't just change the world, they change the people who make them. And sometimes the greatest stabilizer isn't made of magnets or steel, but of love, courage, and the belief that even the smallest dream can take flight if you keep holding on. If you love stories that prove how ordinary people can do extraordinary things, subscribe to Drew Daily Stories, where every day brings a new tale of heart, hope, and unexpected brilliance.